He's being a pain.
So I figured good thing to we're I'm talking to everybody on the show pretty much about adaptations. So I'd like to talk a little bit about hey, you've read a module for Shadowrun, or you've read a module for D&D, and you think you want to use it for Doctor Who. What steps do you use for converting it over to Doctor Who?
Okay.
I'd also like to talk a bit about how do you make the characters like respect the aspect of running away. Because in a lot of games, it's not considered the thing to do to take off like that.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've come into a bit of a problem with some of my gamers who don't entirely seem to understand that it's perfectly okay to run away and fight them some other time. Oh, I'm not entirely sure why they're like that, but that might have to do with like the whole because so many of them get are used to starting off in fantasy genres with like the paladins and the cavaliers and that they
Mm-hmm.
think somehow they'll lose space by running away.
But when you're playing a game where I mean, from the very first episode of Rose, I mean, Runaway was right off the bat what
Yeah,
they were doing.
yeah, I know it is a bit strange.
Okay. So did you pick up a copy yet of the Silurian Experience?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Not yet, but I plan to soon.
I was just curious what your thoughts were, and
No.
also talk about see how your Queen City. Also talk about your Queen City prep is going.
Actually, I came across some. There's a Mage Knight figure set that's currently on clearance at Target for $15. And come payday, I'm going to head to Target and get some miniatures and game tiles.
Ooh, cool. Because yeah, I decided I'm not gonna do Doctor Who this time. I decided I want to do a two-part One Ring game.
Okay, well, my husband will be glad to hear that. He won't have to DM it.
Okay. So you all set to start recording?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right. And we are back with Time Lord Tanya. Time Lord Tanya, how is things going with your Doctor Who game?
Well, no one's died yet.
Oh, come
We
on.
came. We actually came pretty close this last time. I was actually tempted to throw triffids at everyone. If I had done that, we might have actually have had some fatalities. But the night was getting kind of late, so I decided to ignore the triffids in the garden and allowed everybody to just leave.
Would there have been a regeneration?
Perhaps not with the doctor, but he might have lost a companion or two.
Mm. So how do you plan on handling regeneration if the doctor dies? Are you going to use rolling randomly? Are you going to go to another doctor in the line? Have you thought about that?
I honestly haven't really thought about that. That might I might actually just leave that up to the player.
Or one of the things that I saw on the forums that I really like is to pass the doctor character off to another player.
That's an interesting idea. I know that this last time when I changed, when we finished up one story arc and started the next one, I actually did allow players to change characters. I basically said if anybody wants to change characters, you're completely free to do so. Um, we're starting a brand new story arc anyway, so if Amy wants to stay home with Rory, or if Clara wants to, get dropped off and actually, be a teacher and a girlfriend for a while, then that's perfectly okay. And we actually did have a couple of people swap out characters.
So which characters got swapped out?
Clara and Clara and K9 got swapped out for Amy and Rory.
Okay, why did she go with? Because you were saying that she was having a hard time playing Clara, in feeling useful in things, even though she was
Mhm.
being one of the most useful players.
Yeah.
What was her mentality on that? Was it just that she likes the Amy character better, or
Actually, she didn't choose Amy. She chose Rory.
oh, she chose Rory?
She chose Rory.
Why would you choose Rory?
I think that I'm not entirely certain why she chose Rory. I think it's because she wanted to feel like she was doing something by being protective of Amy. I think
Okay,
actually I think that might be why she did it.
all right, gives you a plot goal. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, over the last couple of shows of Threats for Gallifrey, we've been talking about adaptations, about looking at that shelf of books that you have, flipping through it, and going, "Hey, this is a really good classic dungeon crawl. I could see using this for Doctor Who," or
Mm-hmm.
seeing even a Shadowrun thing and saying, "This I would love to run this, but I'm running Doctor Who, and I think I could make this work."
Mm-hmm.
What are your steps for handling that? Have you done that kind of thing, and how do you do it?
I actually kind of have done that. This last game, I actually converted a few D&D monsters to Doctor Who stats. Honestly, you just kind of you look at the character or the monster, and you kind of just look for appropriate abilities and stats that are for the Doctor Who game. That instead of attempting to try and convert them, like say you want essentially an orc with an orc's going to have a higher strength and lower intelligence, so then you just transfer that to similar Doctor Who stats, um, so that when you're actually making your monster character sheet and you're writing everything down and you're assigning your point values, you just keep that in mind while you're doing it.
How about for the traits?
I just try and choose, if not identical ones, then similar ones. I actually wrote up an actual ranger character for me to play as an NPC, and it was actually easier than you might think. You essentially you give them a sword, you give them a shield or a bow or what have you, and you just look up the damage stats for that and whatnot, and then you just sort of look through appropriate character traits that a ranger character might possess, and then you go from there. I also tend to, instead of just specifically taking some traits just from the core rule book, I also take some things from some of the specific doctor rule books.
Mm-hmm.
I think I grabbed a couple from the fourth Doctor handbook this last time, just because there were some Arthurian stories that and characters that were actually listed in the Fourth Doctor handbook. So that was actually very useful for conversion, using from D&D monsters to Doctor Who.
So, what was the story that you borrowed, and how did it
Uh,
turn out?
Well, I didn't actually borrow a story per se. I kind of borrowed an idea from the Coming of the Terraphiles book by Michael Moorcock, um, and that an entire alien civilization loved humanity so much that they remade themselves into historical humans, what
Hmm.
they thought was human history. So you've literally got a planet called Gygax. It's actually listed in the book as an actual world in the Terraphile solar system. It's actually a world called Gygax, and there was no other information other than that. So I used that as a literal jumping off point to basically create a generic fantasy world that you might find in the very early days of Dungeons and Dragons, and I just went from there.
And then what happened?
Well, the players were a little confused at first because they're like, "Wait, this is a legitimate fantasy world. We're actually in at a planet called Gygax." And I'm like, yes, you are. Seriously. Seriously.
And was the doctor aware of this place before he arrived, or did he learn with everybody else?
I told the doctor because he's the 12th incarnation, and the events that happened in Coming of the Terraphiles was his 11th incarnation. I told him that Doctor currently, because he had never actually read the book, the player had never read the book, and I told him, okay, currently, Doctor, you know that you are elsewhere in the solar system, but you actually had such a great time here a while ago that you just decided to come back and have a vacation. It's just not quite going the way you thought it was going to.
And how did it all turn out?
It turned out okay. It actually I had a couple of my players were actually much smarter than dealing with some of the challenges that I threw at everyone. Besides the actual player who was playing the doctor, so suddenly you have Amy basically slap her forehead when because the corridors are 10 foot wide, they're 10 foot by 10 foot, and the TARDIS was barely fitting in the corridor, and the door was only facing one way. So they actually, at one point, they had to get behind the TARDIS, but they couldn't move the TARDIS because of the entire planet is essentially covered by a giant electromagnetic field that's actually originates from within the world's core. So technology does not work on the planet, period. And that's end of discussion. So the doctor doesn't have a sonic screwdriver. The TARDIS doesn't work very well. And so they couldn't move the TARDIS. Well, I had actually planted a wand of shrinking on a dead mage that they found in a room along with a bunch of goblin corpses. And Amy basically smacked her head and goes, I have a wand of shrinking. And then it's like the doctor's like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? So they shrunk the TARDIS.
So when you're adapting, do you worry about adapting themes to fit in, or do you let the show that you're adapting to carry the theme it is, or do you worry more about plot and NPCs for an adaptation?
I tend to think more of the actual story I'm trying to create as opposed to trying to stay as close to the original material as possible. At some point, I don't know if you've actually seen the anime Revolutionary Girl Utena, but there's actually like a bizarre Japan kind of neo fantasy world. And there's actually, I'm going to have an area where there's this really weird school that doesn't seem to have any staff except for a couple of teachers, specifically the fencing teacher, who's also on student council for some reason. No idea how that works, but and basically everyone's in these really cutesy Japanese schoolgirl uniforms, but they're dueling for possession of the power to revolutionize the world, whatever that means. And I just kind of just plan on going nuts with that. As well as possibly even having Godzilla or Gamera make an appearance.
Yay!
That I'm actually, since you want me to do a Godzilla story, Godzilla will actually appear at Queen City Conquest in my Doctor Who game.
Yes. Is it in the title, or is it going to be a big surprise?
It won't be in the title. I'll put some. I won't specifically mention that there'll be giant monsters, but that the crew is going to visit Neo Tokyo, and then the giant monsters will appear.
Yes. Very excited for that. So, how else are your Queen City modules coming along?
I haven't quite decided what else I'm doing. It's kind of up in the air. I really kind of do want a fantasy game, but I don't quite know whether I want to do like a third edition game or even go older school with maybe even a second edition game. I honestly haven't quite figured that out yet, but I actually haven't played a fantasy game, a old school fantasy game in a while, and I'm actually I'm kind of mourning the loss of that, and I want to have swords and magic, and that's kind of one reason why I threw it in my Doctor Who game, to be honest with you.
I'm working on finishing up my 5th edition Manos the Hands of Fate Dungeons and Dragons adventure module.
Yes, I've been reading your posts on that, updates on that on Facebook.
I'm almost done figuring out the master. There's just so many spells in there that are hands or touch based that just give him all of it.
Well, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, it's Manos, the Hand of Fate. I mean, of course they have to be hand touch based, spells. It sort of screams that, doesn't it?
It sure does. And here, I don't know if you can see. Here's the master.
Fantastic.
And I'm working on painting Torgo up right now.
Oh, poor Torgo.
So,
Hmm.
how would you adapt Manos, the Hands of Fate, for Doctor Who? What would be the things you would look at for that?
Ooh, I might look back at the Shakespearean episode with the Tenth Doctor and Martha, and kind of get a feel for the witches and
Mm.
maybe their magic. Maybe throw in a little bit of cultist action going on, um, and just kind of play with it, I suppose.
Okay. And would Torgo be an alien?
Ooh, hmm, that's a good question. It maybe even Torgo could actually, for some bizarre reason, think he's an alien, but he's not. He's actually human. He might be under this bizarre delusion that he's an alien, but he's not.
What other fun things would you put in there to capture the feel of the show?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe even change the setting ever so slightly. Maybe turn it into like a bed and breakfast or something.
You can have you can have stay with Torgo, but you can't bring your American Express card. One trap room that I put in there is you open the door and there's nothing in there but a guillotine, and all these rats come pouring out of the walls and the floor, and they pick up all the characters and start carrying them toward the guillotine, and you're like 6 inches off the ground and you can't really move. You're stuck on the river toward the guillotine, and there's a riddle on the door that basically means you have to sing a round of row, row, row your boat, but with Dungeons and Dragons lyrics, in order to get the rats to take you back out to the door.
Wow.
I was so proud to work that in.
Wow.
And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and we were talking about this before we started recording, in the very first episode of Doctor Who, the big word that I always establish with the show is run.
Yes.
And there's a chase scenes, and there's running away from the aliens, and there's knowing that you're outmatched. How do you get that to be conveyed to a gaming group?
Well, sometimes you almost have to beat it into them. Um, like just this past weekend, I ran a superhero game, and the mecha had a insanely high hardness score, and nobody could penetrate the armor, so they really weren't doing much in the way of damage, and nobody was entirely getting that. It's like you can literally choose not to fight them. I mean, you just can. I mean, it's just one of those things that it's sometimes you just you almost have to beat into them. Like you might actually literally create a challenge that is they're meant to run away from, or not meant to actually face, or to stand down from. And they just keep on going at it and over and over and over again. And it's like, you could actually just run. That is a legitimate option here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the first thing that Christopher Eccleston's doctor said, for crying out loud. Run! As he grabbed Rose's hand, and they ran away from the walking mannequins. I mean, there's no reason why you can't run. And my group has slowly had to have it beaten into them that you can actually run. And we did that. Maybe not in the last game, but I think the game before that. I can't remember what the circumstances were, but they actually finally said, okay, we can actually run from a situation, regroup, and then come at this from a completely different angle.
Or at least, get off and be able to create a boffin thing to be able to help us get an edge on it.
Yes. I do. My players are very good for that. They basically kind of go, okay, what do we have that we can cobble together to make a weapon to defeat this thing? They're actually very good for that.
How about with story points? How is your group with the usage of that? Are they using that to get the most effect from damage and things, or?
Yes. Especially when it comes to basically needing to get it's like, okay, we have to take down these Cybermen. So I'm going to use a story point to roll extra die to make sure that my attack is actually going to succeed. That happens a lot. More so than you might think. It's like, okay, I know that I'm going to need extra dice because I have a feeling that this thing's actually going to have some pretty substantial armor on it, because by your description, it kind of sounds like it. So they will actually use a story point to essentially add extra dice to the roll. And although some of them kind of keep forgetting that the monsters and the NPCs have story points too.
Oh, yes. Do you remember to use them? Because I am so bad at remembering to spend those.
Every so often, I kind of forget, but then I'm just like, you know what? The villain actually legitimately wants to take out Strax, so I'm actually going to have him attempt to smack him in the back of the neck at his exhaust port. So I'm going to burn a story point and add some extra dice to this, because he really wants to take Strax out, because Strax is blowing all of his minions away.
And how are your players also with the other wonderful use of story point of asking the GM for a hint?
That hasn't happened a lot. It has happened a couple of times, especially when they were very confused when I did my Call of Cthulhu story. When Himmler used his secret weird Nazi fortress as a gateway to summon an ancient elder deity. They actually had no idea what to do. So I actually had to remind them, you do realize that you can burn story points to essentially get hints as to what to do about this, right? And then they're like, oh, yeah, duh, okay.
I have a wand of shrinking.
No, thankfully, the player that had it actually remembered that they had it. Went, wait, this is a wand of shrinking. Let's shrink the TARDIS.
Wait, did they get to keep the wand of shrinking, or does it only work on the planet?
Actually, no, it doesn't just work on the planet. Because, of course, it's magic, and that it's high technology to simulate magic, and with also compounding the use of higher mathematics and quantum physics, it will actually work off-world. But the doctor took it from Amy. We were all kind of bummed by that. The doctor's like, give me that. There was only one charge left on it anyway. But the doctor's like, give me that. And he stuck it in his coat pocket. And we're like, aw, are you just going to let him do that?
Amy would not allow that to happen. This is
And
my magic wand.
Amy just went, yeah, I'll get him back later. Trust me. Okay. Okay.
And so, what other Doctor Who news have you heard? What other things are you working on, or things that you're excited about in the Doctor Who universe?
Well, I'm kind of excited for the upcoming Christmas special because there seem to be quite a few rumors floating around about who's either going to be in it or who's not going to be in it. And I'm kind of going, oh yeah, I actually just, I'm really excited for this. And it's probably more excited than the last Christmas special that I'm just kind of going, yes. And I think it's probably because they're going to have a different showrunner. So I'm kind of excited to see how this is going to go and potential new companions along with the Doctor, as well as this may be Capaldi's last season.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of excited to see who might be the next Doctor.
Think they'll get all that into the holiday special?
I don't think they'll get everything into the holiday special, but I think they'll actually kind of work some things into it.
Because all I heard was the rumors that Captain Jack's coming back. Cause the
Yeah, that was the one that I had heard too, but I think that didn't John Burrowman say no, that wasn't happening.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think somebody had asked him at one of the conventions he was at, and he said, "No, I know I've never been approached by anybody at BBC." But then again, for all I know, he may have already secretly filmed his footage, and he just can't talk about it.
Right. Those non-disclosure agreements.
Non-disclosure agreements, like I don't know what you're talking about. I'm done with Doctor Who. I've absolutely no idea of what you're talking about because I signed a contract that says as much.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Time Lord Tanya, for talking to us about Doctor Who, about adaptations, and very excited to see Godzilla conquer Queen City Conquest and see if how a TARDIS can stand up against the king of all lizards.
Oh, well, here's hoping that the TARDIS doesn't get squashed beneath Godzilla's giant feet.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful night.
You too.
And